Very much and welcome to today's session, which is the second module of Getting Ready to Teach for the IGCSE Specification A. I see a couple of comments already about the resources tab. We can pop a hyperlink into the chat there for you so you can access them that way. There are a number of resources for today, but you're very welcome for wherever you're joining in the world. From me in London, it's morning, but I know for many of you, it will be afternoon or evening. So just to check that we can use the chat box, hello from Cyprus. Yes, please pop in the chat box where you're joining us from today. So you're all very welcome. So Cyprus would be a little bit ahead of me, Dubai a few hours ahead of me. So yes, just so that we can check we can all use that chat box. A lot of people from the Middle East by the look of it. Where else are people joining from today? So while you're popping that into the chat box, I'm just going to talk about the resources that are available for you. We've got a number of resources. We've got a copy of these delegate slides. We've got SO2, the exemplar pack. I'm going to be referring to quite a lot of that today. We've got SO3, which is a coursework assignment A that's been reworked with the amended mark scheme that was for first assessment this June. SO4, which is the question paper for paper 1, and SO5, which is the mark scheme for paper 1. We've got SO6, which is the examiner report. I'll be referring to that quite a lot during the course of today. We've got SO7, which is the question paper for paper 2. SO10, which is the principal moderator report for the coursework for Unit 3. And we've got SO11, which is the language aid title guidance if you're taking the coursework route. I'll be referring to those during the course of the training. I'll be giving you a little bit of time to make sure you've got those to hand because you're going to be doing a bit of marking. So in terms of what we're looking at today, we are going to be looking at a bit of content. This is much more the nitty-gritty of assessment. Unit 1, which I ran on Monday, was very much an introduction, but I'll be talking about that a little bit more on the next slide. So we're going to do some assessments, some marking, and then we'll be talking about support resources and questions towards the end. So as I said, this is Module 2. Module 1 on Monday was focused on content, teaching and planning. Today's module is much more about assessments and marking. So we'll be looking at the assessment objectives, the types of questions for this qualification, the mark schemes that we use. We'll be practicing those, using those mark schemes with some exemplar work. And then the last little bit about assessment and exemplars. So if you're new to us, you're very welcome. I did talk a little bit about this slide in Monday's training. I think, Pearson is the world's leading organization for assessment. When I first started working as an examiner, many years ago now, obviously now a senior examiner and trainer for Pearson, but we were at Excel. And that was very much the assessment arm of the organization. And then it joined with the publishing arm, which was Pearson. So we're now Pearson Excel. But as I said on Monday, I'm always amazed by these statistics that we partner with 6,500 schools, colleges, and employers. We mark over 10 million scripts. We operate in over 70 countries. 3.5 million students a year is quite a mind-blowing stat, I think, even for an English teacher. So, thinking now about the content of the IGCSE Specification A, this is just a reminder of how the qualification is made up. So we've got here component 1, which is mandatory for all students. So just going to talk a little bit about that. That question paper is divided into two sections. It is the more heavily weighted of the question papers. It's worth 60% of the final grade. So it's a 2-hour, 15-minute exam. It carries 90 marks. The focus of that is non-fiction text and transactional writing. So in section A, the reading section, it's a mixture of short and long answer questions. It's related to a non-fiction text from part 1 of the anthology, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment, and one previously unseen extract. And then section B is the writing. It's transactional writing that students are asked to do in this paper. It's a 145-mark writing question. Students given a choice of 2 there, and they're given the audience form and purpose of that piece of writing. So that's component 1. And the newer centres choose either component 2, which is the exam route, or component 3, which is the coursework route. So it might be just a good idea at this point, if you wouldn't mind just popping into the chat whether you're choosing the exam route or whether you're going to choose the coursework route, just because it would depend how I weight the session later on. So we've got a couple of courseworks coming in there. Exam coursework. Oh, we're about 50-50, I'd say, by the look of it so far. So some taking component 2 and some taking component 3. We do have some specific coursework training coming up in the next couple of weeks. If you look on the website, you'll be able to sign up for that. That will be, give you a complete couple of hours with a full focus on the coursework. We will touch on it today, but not in as much detail as that full coursework training. Okay, so going back to the content. So if you're taking the exam route, the second paper 2 is 1.5 hours. It's on poetry and prose text and imaginative writing. And section A is 130-mark essay question on a poetry or prose text given to students on the day from part 2 of the anthology, so they will have studied that. And this is equally weighted across the reading and writing sections. And section B of that question paper is imaginative writing. Now, if you're following the coursework route, you do component 1 and component 3. And here there are 2 coursework assignments. And the component 3 coursework has changed for first assessment this June 2024. So that will be what you'll be doing going forwards. It's poetry and prose text. Students have to write on 3 of the pieces from the anthology. 1 has to be poetry, 1 has to be prose, and the third one can be either. And then assignment B, which is the imaginative writing task. So that's just a quick reminder of those. There is, of course, the spoken language endorsement, which I'll just touch on a little bit later. There won't be full training on that because there's a lot on the website for that, but just that reminder that for the IGCSE, it's optional, and for the home GCSE, it's mandatory. So that's just a quick slide about that. There will be another slide later on. So just a quick reminder of what students study and the skills that they study for this qualification. It's a range of non-fiction and fiction texts from the Pearson edXL International GCSE Anthology. They develop their skills in reading and understanding unseen non-fiction texts. They develop skills to analyze and compare different forms of writing. They develop their skills for both transactional and imaginative writing. Of course, transactional in paper 1 and imaginative in paper either 2 or 3. and they develop their speaking and listening skills. And of course, there is that optional endorsement that appears on the front of their certificate at either pass, merit, or distinction. So talking about the anthology, now this is the issue 7 of the anthology, and always, of course, make sure that you're working with the latest edition of the anthology. We talked a little bit about this on Monday, but if you're only attending today's session, you won't have seen that. But the anthology is at the heart of the qualification. So part 1 of the anthology is used for paper 1. Part 2 of the anthology is used for paper 2 or for the coursework. There is a part 3 of the anthology that's used for the literature. So just be aware, if you're doing the 4ET literature, that's why that part 3 is there. It can be ordered from the Pearson website. Students have a copy to use in the classroom. All of the texts for each part of the paper need to be studied. The students need to be confident in using those texts. So just a quick reminder of what the texts are for paper 1. So this is part 1 of the anthology. So we did have a little conversation on Monday about which were your favourite texts. But obviously we want to do the nitty-gritty of assessment today a little bit more, but just a reminder of what these texts are for part 1. The Danger of a Single Story, A Passage to Africa, The Explorer's Daughter, Explorers Are Boys Messing About, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, Young and Dyslexic, A Game of Polo with a Headless Goat, which is what we'll be focusing on today because that was the extract that was chosen for the June 2024 paper. Beyond the Sky and the Earth, H is for Hawk, and Chinese Cinderella. So that's just a quick overview, some lovely, lovely texts there. Students really enjoy working with those. And then the poetry and prose, we've got, this is for paper 2 and for coursework. We've got Disabled, Out, An Unknown Girl, which is the one we'll be working with a little bit today, because that was in the June 2024 paper 2. The Bright Lights of Sarajevo, Still I Rise, The Story of an Hour, The Necklace, Significant Cigarettes, and Whistle and I'll Come to You. So that's for paper 2 and for the coursework. So that's just a reminder of the content of the anthology parts 1 and 2 for 4EA. So we're moving on now to thinking about assessment and marking, and going to talk for a little while about the assessment objectives. So there are 3 reading assessment objectives covering understanding of text, critical analysis, and comparison. They're AO1, AO2, and AO3. And there are 2 writing assessment objectives, AO4 and AO5, that cover content and structure and accuracy. And of course, then there is the 1 spoken language assessment objective if you're doing that endorsement. So just a reminder of what these assessment objectives are and the weightings that they carry. So AO1 is read and understand a variety of texts, selecting and interpreting information, ideas, and perspectives. And that's 15% of the final grade. AO2 is understand and analyze how writers use linguistic and structural devices to achieve their effect. That's 20% of the final qualification. AO3, which is explore links and connections between writers' ideas and perspectives, as well as how these are conveyed. And that's 15% of the final grade. AO4, which is so AO1, AO2, and AO3 are the reading assessment objectives. AO4 and AO5 are the writing assessment objectives. So AO4 is communicate effectively and imaginatively, adapting form, tone, and register of writing for specific purposes and audiences. That's 30% of the final qualification. AO5 is write clearly, using a range of vocabularies, sentence structures with appropriate paragraphing and accurate spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So we can see that the reading assessment objectives are half of the final grade, and the writing assessment objectives also half of the final grade. So that's just a little bit of a reminder of the overall construction of the assessment objectives. Okay, yeah, I'm sure that the moderator in the background can repost the link for the resources for you. Okay, so working through very logically, paper 1. So paper 1 in section A, we're looking at assessment of the 3 reading assessment objectives, AO1, AO2, and AO3. And section B, the transactional writing, is assessing AO4 and AO5. So in terms of the requirements for paper 1, section A, we're looking at a mixture of short answer and extended response questions. The 3 short answer questions, questions 1, 2, and 3, are on an unseen non-fiction text. Then there's excuse me, one extended response question on an anthology text from part 1 of the non-fiction text. That's question 4. It carries 12 marks. And then that obviously assesses AO2. And one comparison question on the unseen and the same selected anthology text. That's question 5. And that's where AO3 is assessed. The anthology text is printed in the exam booklet. Obviously, they've studied it at home, or they've studied it, sorry, at school with you. They've revised it at home, and one of those texts will appear for them. So we've got across this section A, AO1, AO2, and AO3 being assessed with 45 marks in total. So the scripts that we're going to be looking at today are all from the main paper. I talked a little bit on Monday about the fact that we have 4EA 101 and 4EA 101R, which is the regional paper. They are both of the same quality, but they have different extracts because of the time differences for these papers. So today we're going to be looking at the main paper. If anyone next week is doing the meeting the assessment criteria training, for that I'm going to be using the R paper, the regional paper, so that you have a variety of exemplars. But for today, you're going to be needing the exemplars that's SO2 in that document. And thank you very much, Ellie, for popping that hyperlink up there for our delegates today. So you're going to be needing SO2, the question paper, which is SO4, and the mark scheme, which is SO5. Okay, so moving to question 1, we've got a few comments here from the principal examiner on responses to question 1. So we're just going to have a quick look at these. The important advice for this question is to look at the line references given and to select single words or short phrases from the passage, not to attempt to use own words, and not to spend time giving comment or explanation, which cannot be rewarded here. This is AO1, so that's why. On a few occasions where both marks were not achieved, this is usually because the candidate had not looked at the correct lines and gave words and phrases from line 1. Examiners noted that a palette of greys from line 1 was sometimes selected. A few responses selected adjectives from the lines, such as illuminating or sparkling, but these were describing the effects of the weather, rather than the weather itself. If the given lines were simply copied out in full, then no marks could be awarded because no skills of selection had been demonstrated. So it's about selecting from the text. Okay, so while I'm reading these, if you can make sure you've got that SO2, SO4, SO5 ready, because we are going to be doing a little bit of marking later on, not on these retrieval questions though. So here we've got some examples of answers. So we can see here that the question, question 1 in the June 2024 paper was asking students to find two questions, two examples of the weather. And we've got here in the mark scheme, on the right hand side of this slide, we've got the examples from the mark scheme. Candidates could have written sun, clouds, breeze, downpour, grey and white that refer to the weather. The parts of that mark scheme that are in brackets, students may have written that, and that's fine. So this first candidate, answer 1, brisk breeze, recent downpour. We can see that both of those are in the mark scheme. So that candidate got full marks. There is no need to write in full sentences here. Quotations alone are enough for the mark here. And then the second candidate there who's written brisk breeze, that of course is in the mark scheme, so they got a mark for that. But then they've written sparkling. Now there's no mark for sparkling. That describes the effect of the rain. It's the rain that's the weather. That's the effect of the rain on the cobblestones, not the weather. So that candidate only achieved 1 mark there. Okay, lovely. So I think everybody has the resources. If you haven't got the resources, just scroll up a little bit and the hyperlink is in the chat and you'll be able to download them from there. Okay, so that's our very quick retrieval question. So moving on now to question 2. These comments are from the examiner report, which is I'm just having a look, SO6 in your download pack today. And this is from page 9 of that examiner report. So the principal examiner has written here that examiners noted a range of different approaches to answering the question. Some used bullet points to distinguish between points. Some wrote brief, straight to the point responses, and others wrote much longer responses that covered more points than we needed. It was clear that candidates had almost all clearly understood the events taking place. Where candidates did not score full marks, it tended to be because they did not follow the instructions in your own words, and too much of their response was lifted from the text. Others lost marks because they repeated points or because they referred to the wrong part of the text. Examiners reported that, as always, the most successful approach employed by candidates was to make at least 4 clear, discrete points. If these are set out separately, then it can help the candidate and the examiner to see at a glance how many points are made. So it's important here to remember, and this point is also made in the examiner report, important to remember that the questions ask candidates to describe. And although it's not necessary to write at length, it's not acceptable to list very brief points. I mean, they can bullet point them, and we'll see an example of that in a moment. But the response needs to be in full sentences that demonstrate an understanding and secure interpretation of the text. So the question here was, look again at lines 41 to 51 in your own words, describe what happens. And we can see on the right-hand side the extract of the indicative content from the mark scheme. And I'm just going to give you a moment to have a little look at that. Just have a little read of what the candidate has put. You might need to return to the extract, but I'll just give you 30 seconds to have a little look at that, and then I'll talk through it. This is from page 10 of the examiner report. The candidate has set out the points clearly. They're all valid points. We actually have one more than we need here. There are actually, as you can see from the arrows going to the right-hand side, there are actually 5 points made, but obviously there are only 4 marks available. And the examiner tip here is that, setting out the points on separate lines helps both the student and the examiner. So that's a little bit about question 2. Of course, questions 1, 2, and 3 are all on the unseen text. So moving on to question 3, again, this is from page 17 of the examiner report. So let's have a little look at what the principal examiners said here, that successful candidates often worked methodically through the section of the text, identifying key points. There were very few who looked at information that was not in the relevant lines. A few candidates expected long quotations with no comment to act as evidence or their own understanding, but answers including overlong quotations very rarely gained full marks. A few other candidates lost marks because they commented on actions such as that he came last or that he fainted rather than thoughts and feelings. So it's about answering the question. In summary, as in previous series, the best answers used a good balance of short quotation and some interpretation and paid attention to how many marks the question was worth and made 5 clear and discrete points, often set out separately, which, as with question 2, can be useful both to the candidate and the examiner. So we can see now a response. And the question here was from lines 64 to 74. Explain the writer's thoughts and feelings. You may support your points with brief quotations. So these 5 points have been clearly set out. We can see again the arrows pointing to the relevant parts of the mark scheme. What this candidate does is make a clear statement and supports each one with an apt quotation. So I'm just going to give you a moment again to have a quick look at how that was awarded. Questions 1, 2, and 3 are points marking. So 2, 4, and 5 marks available respectively for each of those questions. I'll just give you a moment to have a quick look at that before we move on to question 4. So questions 1, 2, and 3 are all AO1. So we're moving now to question 4, which assesses AO2, which is the analytical assessment objective. We've also moved now from the unseen text to the anthology text, which, thanks very much, Ellie, for answering those questions. The anthology text, so rather than the unseen text. So this is the text that students that have studied with you in class. So we're now looking at, there are 12 marks available for this question. So it's a more detailed and developed response is required. Candidates will need to comment on the writer's use of language and structure, but must read the whole question to ensure that their points are relevant. Now, of course, they've studied this. You will have gone through the language and structure devices used by the writer in studying this anthology text. But the student has to do some work here. They can't just kind of regurgitate everything that you've told them. It has to be relevant to the actual question asked. Language points, we talked a little bit about AO2 on Monday, but language points might consider things like word choice, their impact, types of language employed, techniques, of course, such as similes, metaphors. We looked at a list of those the other day. The effect of these must be considered. How do they contribute to the tone, to the reader engagement, to the focus of the question? Structural points, of course, might cover such elements such as sentence length and structure, use of rhetorical questions, paragraphing, development of ideas throughout the text, use of punctuation, and again, the purpose effect of these should always be considered. So the question in the June 2024 paper, as I said earlier, the anthology text chosen was a game of polo with a headless goat, and candidates were told to remind themselves of the extract, text 2 in the source booklet. How does the writer, Emma Levine, use language and structure in text 2 to interest and engage the reader? You should support your answer with close reference to the extract, including brief quotations. So that was what they were asked to do. We're now going to have a little look at some comments from the principal examiner. We're going to have a little look at the mark scheme, and then we're going to do some marking. So that's where we're headed in the next few slides. So the principal examiner said that at the lower levels, candidates either identified features of language and sometimes structure, but offered little explanation of their effect. For example, the writer used a metaphor, which is interesting, or described and made general comments such as, this makes the reader want to read on. At this level, responses often lacked focus on the question, provided a narrative summary, or dealt with only a limited part of the text. Mid-level candidates tended to work through the text, made a sound range of points, and selected apt textual references for support. However, often they did not move on to analyse closely the impact or connotations of individual words and phrases, or fully consider the effect of structural features. Where sound points about language were made, they often covered the hyperbolic use of eternity, the onomatopoeia in the list of sounds, and the writer's use of colloquial terms, lads. The most successful responses dealt with the whole passage and produced nuanced accounts, selecting their textual references judiciously from throughout the text. Often at this level, candidates were able to analyse closely the connotations and impacts of particular words and phrases, and offer alternative interpretations rather than stating a point as if it were an absolute fact. There was a comment as well. I mean, there are lots of comments in the examiner report, but there was a comment about some candidates spending a little bit too long on this question, and including introductions and conclusions, which really were unnecessary. Also, there is plenty of room in the answer booklet for candidates to complete their answer in the booklet, and really they shouldn't be asking for extra sheets. And if they are, that's a suggestion that they might be spending a little bit too much time on question 4 at the expense of some of the higher tariff questions. So a little look now at the levels-based mark scheme. Remember, questions 1, 2, and 3 are points-based, and we move on. Question 4, question 5, and question either 6 or 7. These are levels-based mark schemes. So it's not points marking, it's about the quality of the response overall. I'm just going to stop before I go through this mark scheme and just have a look at the chat. Obviously, we've got over 50 delegates in this meeting. I do a lot of talking, and sometimes the chat goes up very quickly. So there, I'm just going to have a little quick look. One is about the recording, which has been answered by the moderator. So I think the only question I haven't seen. Now there are 2 questions there. Now I'll pick those 2 up, and then I'll go through the mark scheme. So how long would you advise? It really depends on your candidates. There is obviously advice in the rubric on the front of the question paper. Some schools advise their candidates by the number of marks available. Some advise candidates by the reading section followed by the writing section, and that really depends on the type of students you have. Is it unnecessary to write any sort of introduction at all for this question? If the candidate is giving an overview of what they're about to talk about, something like the writer uses language and structure too, that isn't giving them any marks. I would say advise your students to stick with where the marks are. This is AO2, it's analysis of language and structure, go straight in. There's only 12 marks available. I mean, 12 marks is obviously significant in terms of this exam, but we are then moving on to 22 and then to the 45 marker, which is 27 plus 18. So we don't want them to be using time here at the expense of those higher tariff questions. Okay, so let's look at this levels-based mark scheme for this question. So just assessing AO2, and we have 2 bullet points in each of the levels. So the first bullet point is about what they're doing with the language and structure, and the second bullet point is about the references. So we can see that they move up. We're working with 5 levels. So in level 1, we're looking at the word basic and little in terms of their identification and their understanding of those language structure devices. In level 2, we're looking at some understanding and comment on the language and structure, and the quotations will be valid. In level 3, in the 5 to 7 range, we're looking at clear understanding and explanation of language and structure, and this will become much clearer when we look at some responses in a moment. And the references here are appropriate and relevant. So that's in the 5 to 7 range. In level 4, in the 8 to 10 range, the understanding of the language and structure devices will be thorough, and the candidate will be exploring how the writers use those to achieve their effects. And the references here will be detailed, appropriate, and fully support the points. And then in level 5, the understanding will be perceptive, and the candidate will be analysing the language and structure and how the writer has used those. And the references there will be discriminating, and they'll clarify the points being made. So that's a levels-based mark scheme that we're going to be using. So just a reminder, the mark scheme is, for paper 1, is SO5 in the download. That's what we're going to be using now as we move towards our first marking activity of the session. So what we're going to be doing now, there are 3 exemplars in the pack. There are 4A, 4B, 4C. The mark scheme is at the end of that. We're going to take some time now to read them and decide which level you'd place each script in. And we're going to use the chat to make your comments. So I will be muting for a little bit. I'll probably give you maybe 7 minutes to just have a little quick look at this, somewhere between 5 and 7 minutes. One is a level 3, one is a level 4, and one is a level 5. You know, it's not, I'm not trying to guess what's in my head. Which one is which, and where would you place them? Just the level, not the mark. So I'm going to pop something in the chat so you all know what we're doing, because it will go quiet and give you a little bit of time to have a look through. Remembering, of course, that the exemplars are in SO2 in your download pack. So I'll be on mute for a few minutes. So as you decide on the levels for 4A, 4B and 4C, if you could just put the level you're awarding into the chat box and then I'll go through these. Thank you. Just wait for a couple more votes to come in on these 3 scripts and then I'll give you some feedback. And most of you here are spot on. So 4A, the candidate here makes a range of appropriate points about the use of humour, danger, sound, and offers some clear understanding. Occasionally, the explanation is not really focused on the use of language or structure, and there are some narrative elements. The points, although supported by relevant references, are not really developed, and the response sits in the middle of level 3 on a mark of 6. And you'll find in the examiner report, of course, and Results Plus, there are these lovely little tips for your students to help them improve their responses. So here it's good practice to make points relating to the beginning, middle, and end of the text, as this response does, but aim to develop ideas fully. So, yep, 4B, well done, all of you. That's 4B is indeed level 4. Here we've got the candidate shows a clear and at times thorough understanding, looking at those keywords, of course, in the mark scheme, and makes a number of relevant points about the use and effect of listing, sensory language, and the use of a semicolon. It is clear that the idiom colourful language has not been understood, but there is some exploration of the implications of survival of the fittest. The response meets all of level 3 and there is some exploration rather than explanation. So it moves it into level 4 on 8 marks. And again, the examiner tip, the ending of the extract is quite significant, but has not been covered here. Try to include the most important parts of the whole text in your answer. And then the last one, script 4C, was, as you have all said, well done on your marking there, very impressive, is level 5. So the response contains a wide range of interesting points. The candidate is discriminating in their selection of references and offers analysis of a range of language and structural features. These include the fact that the extract opens in media res, the use of tone and humour, a close focus on and analysis of the use of roaring, oral imagery, the implications of the verb swerve, and the ending of the extract. So it's a lovely response, perceptive, detailed, fulfills all of level 5, got the top mark of 12. Writing down how much time should be spent on a particular question, of course, can be useful for students. In terms of that, some comments in the examiner report about some students spending too long on this question. So that's everything about AO2 for question 4 on paper 1. So we're now looking at this is the only place in the qualification where AO3, the comparative assessment objective, is assessed. So we're moving on now to question 5, and we're going to look at the requirements of the question. So here, compare is the command verb of the question. So it's a good idea to introduce comparative points right from the start. Candidates will be asked to compare how the writers present their ideas and perspectives. So they need to consider the author's viewpoint, attitudes, thoughts, opinions about their subject matter. Candidates should look for points of both similarity and difference and support what they say with evidence from the text. The indicative content of section of the mark scheme for the specimen papers and for obviously all of the past papers, the main paper and the R paper, give a good idea of the kind of comments that candidates could make. So the actual question in the June paper was this. And obviously now they're working with the unseen text and the anthology text. So question 5 is based on both text 1 and text 2 from the source booklet. Compare how the writers present their ideas and perspectives about their experiences. Support your answer with detailed examples from both texts, including brief quotations. So that was what they were asked to do for this question. So these again are comments from the principal examiner in that principal examiner report. There are more comments in there for you, but we've picked out some of the main ones here. At the lower end, candidates tended to focus on obvious links between the texts, such as both being about races, one being a race in water whilst the other was on land, both being first-person accounts. Often these answers gave a point, perhaps supported by a quotation, but with no development, quickly moving on to making another point. Some candidates at this level retold the events of the text, that narrative approach, which is often unhelpful, sometimes with greater emphasis on one text than the other. Often, of course, that will be the one that they know, the anthology text, rather than focusing on comparison, which is what this question is asking for, or examining the perspectives and experiences of the narrators. Yet others wrote about one text at some length before moving on to the next, without really drawing any links between the two. Some candidates wrote about two completely different elements of the text where no useful comparison could be drawn. The more successful responses focused almost immediately on comparing specific details of the extracts and looked at the writer's perspectives as well as their ideas. I'm going to be talking about those two words, ideas and perspectives, in a moment. Many candidates identified the essential differences between Fogel as a participant and Levine as an adventurous observer. with some pointing out that she did become a participant in the second race of those following the donkey race. So a little bit, as I said, about ideas and perspectives. In the examiner reports and in the mark scheme, it has been noted that students need to compare both ideas and perspectives of the author. That's over the time of this specification. Where most students can pick up on the ideas of the text, it is important that they think about the perspectives. This is something that you can introduce in your teaching of text 2, and then remind students to look out for this in their reading of the unseen text, text 1. Meaning, of course, that the those perspectives, the tone, the opinion, the point of view, the attitudes, the values of the piece when you're studying it as an anthology text can be pointed out there, and then students have to try and find it in the unseen text when they're reading it in the exam. So that's just a little bit there. So moving on to the indicative mark scheme here for this question 5. Remember, this is a high tariff question. There are 22 marks available for this AO3 comparison question. So this is there's lots here about we're looking at 3 bullet points where we're about links and connections. So the first bullet point here is about the comparison. The second bullet point is about the ideas and perspectives. And the third bullet point is about the references. So looking at level 1, we're going to go up looking at the comparisons in each level. So in level 1, really it doesn't compare. In level 2, we're talking about obvious comparisons, like that one I was just talking about. They're both about a race. In level 3, there's a range of comparisons between the text. In level 4, there's a wide range. And in level 5, there's a varied and comprehensive range. Moving on to the ideas and perspectives, the second bullet point. In level 1, it's descriptive, narrative approach, retelling the story. In level 2, there's some comment. In level 3, and we've got these words again that we saw in the AO2 mark scheme, explanation. And then in level 4, exploration. And in level 5, we've got some real analysis of those ideas and perspectives. Then when we're looking at the references, in level 1, they're limited. In level 2, valid. In level 3, appropriate and relevant. In level 4, they're balanced across the text and they support what the student is saying. And in level 5, they're balanced, they're discriminating, they're fully supporting those points. So there are 5 levels in this mark scheme. Of course, we have the indicative content, and just a reminder that that list, that it's a very, very extensive list. It's not a checklist. It's called indicative content because it's an indication of what a student might write. But obviously, we're going to be applying this levels-based mark scheme as we move now to our marking exercise. So again, we've got 3 scripts for you, 5A, 5B, 5C. We're going to follow the same approach. Just to say there's much more in the examiner report that you might want to read through here about approaches to this question. So just a reminder that that's from page 35 onwards of the examiner report. So we've got a level 3, a level 4, and a level 5 for you there. I'm going to mute again. Which one's level 3? Which one's level 4? Which one's level 5? And we're going to do the same as we did for question 4. I'll be going through those, but I'm going to mute for 5 minutes while you have a chance to read. And they are slightly longer, so it may be six minutes that I'll be on mute, but I'll pop the task into the chat again. Anybody else want to pop their scores in? Lovely, thank you very much. So 5A. Oh, yeah, we've just got a few more coming in. I'll just wait for those to come in. Oh, we've got a couple of people wondering about 5B. Yeah, 5C, definitely a level 5, 3, 4, 5. Yes, Lorraine, spot on there. Well done. Yeah, so your marking is very good. So, the level 3 one was indeed 5A, and this response compares the text all the way through. We can see that. The response points out that whilst Fogel is a participant, Levine is a spectator. However, both texts are about humorous, unorthodox events. So the student has kind of stepped back and been able to see that. The use of the word nostalgia is unclear, but the candidate understands that Fogel's childhood was unhappy. The response discusses the humour achieved through language, Levine, and situation, Fogel. The unfortunate endings of each event are considered and a comparison drawn between Fogel's battle analogy and Levine's mention of anarchy. So that was given a mark of 13 in level 3. And then the examiner tipped there to achieve a mark in level 4, aim to explore and develop points of comparison. So moving on to 5B, which was indeed level 4. So the response begins with a list of relevant points of comparison and moves on to explain that Fogel is a competitor, whilst Levine is a spectator. Fogel's experience is seen as the reason for his use of jargon. The scene setting of both extracts is mentioned, but the response only makes a developed point about text 1. The changes in the tone of each text are outlined, and the response details each writer's use of active verbs. Personification in text 1 is aligned with zoomorphism in text 2. The final paragraph considers similes and Fogel's semantic field of war, plus Levine's reference to Formula 1 without rules. Quite a wide range of points here. Comparison kept at the fore throughout this. And if we're thinking again of those words, in level 3, explanation. Here, there's exploration of ideas and perspectives. If you want some evidence of that, look at those final paragraphs of the response and compare that with the level 3 response. The references here are mostly balanced. So it's towards the top of level 4. It was awarded a mark of 17. And then, as you've all rightly said, the 5C is indeed level 5. There's a varied and comprehensive range of comparisons here. It's a lovely answer, isn't it? Some of the points are not quite as well developed as they might be, which is why it doesn't go right to the top there. It begins with that considering Fogel as a participant and Levine as a spectator. Students are quite good at that point, aren't they? Talks about the language and structure features that the writers employ, compares those, covers the unexpected endings, the focus on the crowds, talks about tone, which is often a discriminator, moves through the writer's feelings and perspectives, and there are pertinent references, or well supported. So level 5 on a mark of 20 there for script 5C. So that brings us to the end of the reading questions on paper 1. We're now going to move on to the writing questions. Remember, this is transactional writing. It's questions 6 and 7. Students have a choice there. They choose one of the two questions. So the requirements here are they're advised to spend about 45 minutes on this question. They answer one from a choice of two. It's transactional in its focus. So it's an article for a newspaper, a magazine, a speech, a letter, and so on. The two assessment objectives in play here are AO4 and AO5, 45 marks in total, AO4 out of 27 and AO5 out of 18. So the questions in June were these. They could choose question 6. A magazine is inviting readers to send in a review of a memorable event which they have seen or experienced. Write the review that you would submit to the magazine. Your review may include a description of the event, your opinion of the event and the reason why it was memorable, and any other points you wish to make. And then we've got the signposting in italics to the AO5, which is always there. Your response will be marked for the accurate and appropriate use of vocabulary, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. And they could have chosen question 7, which is too much emphasis is perhaps placed on the idea of winning. It can be just as important to take part and try hard. Write the text for a speech to be delivered to your peers in which you express your views on this statement. Your speech may include, and we've got that scaffold, what winning might mean in different areas of life, the benefits of taking part, and any other points you wish to make. Now, in the June 2024 series, question 7 was the most popular. So this is from page 68 of the examiner report, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. But the examiner report, the feedback on question 6 is in the examiner report. So here we have, this task was by far the most popular of the two writing tasks and invited candidates to write a speech. At the lower end, candidates sometimes lost sight of the form, took quite a narrow view of winning as applying solely to sporting competitions and seemed unsure of their own opinions. Some responses were limited by erratic control of punctuation and lack of clear structure. In the middle, candidates were using a suitable tone and register. Most had a very clear idea of what the form required, although one examiner pointed out that candidates could consider moving away from good evening, good afternoon, I'm here to speak about openings. And at a higher level, responses were eloquent, sophisticated, used challenging vocabulary, well crafted. That was a discriminator. So looking at the mark scheme for AO4, one more bit from the examiner report. So this is from page 71. To achieve the highest in AO4, writing needs to be perceptive, subtle, and sophisticated. And for AO5, candidates need to order their ideas, writing clear paragraphs, effective links. They need to be accurate, but also a strategic use of an extensive vocabulary. Not avoid using an ambitious vocabulary because they fear making spelling mistakes. Give it your best shot. They should aim for an assured and controlled use of a range of carefully crafted sentence structures. Frequently, we saw openings with intriguing questions, powerful statements, short sentences, rather than that good morning, good afternoon. Okay, so the mark scheme for AO4. This is about communication. So the first bullet point is about communication, the second one about purpose and audience, and the third one about form, tone, and register. Again, we're working with 5 levels here. So the first bullet point is about communication. So level 1, basic, level 2, broadly appropriate, level 3, clearly, level 4, successfully, level 5, perceptive and subtle. So in terms of audience and purpose, our second bullet point, level 1 is little awareness. Level 2, some grasp. Level 3, clear sense. Level 4, secure realization and meeting that, obviously, the requirements of the reader. Level 5, sharply focused. And then in terms of form, tone, and register, level 1, little awareness, level 2, straightforward, level 3, appropriate, level 4, effective, and level 5, sophisticated. So that's the communication assessment objective. The mark scheme for the AO5, which is about the write clearly, vocabulary, sentence structure, paragraphing, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. The first bullet point is about information and ideas and structural and grammatical features. The second bullet point about vocabulary. The third bullet point about punctuation, sentence structure. So in level 1, expresses information, limited use of the grammatical features. Level 2, expresses and orders, paragraph used there. Level 3, develops and connects information, grammatical features and paragraphing make the meaning clear. Level 4, managing information and ideas, wide selective vocabulary and punctuation for clarity, managing sentences for deliberate effect. And level 5, extensive vocabulary used strategically. And then when we go to the punctuation, and sentence structures, basic in level 1, some control in level 2, accurate and varied in level 3, positioned for clarity in level 4, and accuracy to aid emphasis and precision in level 5. So we're working with those 2 mark schemes when we're marking question 6 or question 7. So moving on to our marking activity. Now, we have got 3 scripts here. I don't want us to mark all 3, but we've put all 3 in so that you've got a range there for benchmarking if you're using this as benchmarks for mock exams and so on. But given the time, if I can just ask you just to skim 7B and 7C, which are the level 4 and level 5 responses. 7A is level 3, but you do have a copy of the slides and the commentaries. So just going to mute for about 4 minutes maybe and ask you to look at 7B, 7C, just skimming through those, and you'll get a good idea of the level there. One of those is level 4, one is level 5. Thank you. hopefully that gave you enough time to just have a skim through those two. So 7A, which you can look at after today, was a mark of 28 in level 3. But I asked you to look at 7B. So we can see here the total mark was 33 out of 45. So firmly in level 4 for the AO4. But the error is keeping it at the bottom of level 4 for the AO5. So that's the commentary there, that they aim to engage the reader straight away with a series of questions in the opening paragraph, discuss some interesting ideas stimulated by those questions. Good use of the anecdote there. So it's a secure realization, those words from the mark scheme, and quite a wide vocabulary, but of course those errors. So, one of the tips there, consider what strategies you would use to engage the reader right from the start. And then thinking about 7C, the level 5 response, this one got a total of 43 out of 45. We can see this is one that I was talking earlier about perhaps possible ways of opening a speech that weren't good morning or good afternoon, I'm here to talk to you about. This one uses a question in the opening paragraph, provides a possible answer in a skillfully constructed start to this a short and at times sophisticated response. There's an anecdote here that's used well, perceptive communication. There is a manipulation of quite complex ideas here. It's quite an extensive vocabulary. And again, the examiner tip about, note how the candidate uses personal experience as a link to a wider theme. A little anecdote about them and the wider learnings from that. So that's a really nice top-ish response for you to use as a benchmark. And that brings us to the end of paper 1. Of course, paper 1 is a longer paper, and we've also gone through the mark schemes for the writing. So we've covered those as we move towards paper 2. So for paper 2, we don't need as much time, obviously, but the requirements for paper 2, and we've had a little talk about who's doing paper 2 and who's doing the coursework. But for the exam paper, excuse me, it's an essay on one anthology text that appears in the exam paper from part 2 of the anthology. Question 1 assesses AO1 and AO2, and it's worth 30 marks. And section B is a piece of imaginative writing, creative response, and AO4 and AO5 are being assessed. The weighting there, of course, is different from paper 1. The weighting here is 18 and 12 rather than 27 and 18. So we've got some exemplars for you coming up again. But just that little reminder of section A being AO1 and AO2, section B being AO4 and AO5. So the question was on an unknown girl, and the question was, how does the writer present the importance of traditional Indian culture in an unknown girl? So this is a text they've studied, of course, in class, but we're looking for an answer that it answers the specifics of the question asked in the paper. And here it was, you should write about the importance of traditional Indian culture, and it's scaffolded. So how does the writer present the cultural experience with the unknown girl, how the writer presents feelings about the place, and the use of language and structure for the AO2, of course. You should support your answer with close reference to the poem, including brief quotations. So we've got some comments here on AO1 from the principal examiner. The most successful responses tended to be the ones that really understood the contrast with the Western aspects, discussing the invading Western influences, the judgmental tone, how this contrasts with the beautiful description of the bazaar, and how this links to the poet's own feelings. Most answers link the unknown girl to the idea of traditional Indian culture and the importance of the culture and the overall theme of the poem. Of course, many of them enjoying the comments about the hennaing and so on. The poet's dual nationality, her desire to absorb her Indian roots, and the fact that the henna would fade in a week, and that represented the loss of that, being in those different geographical locations. The less successful responses for AO1 tended only to repeat what was being said in the poem, so almost translating it, if you like. And then for AO2, level 5 responses had detailed analysis of language, provided details about the structure, many referring to the cyclical nature of the poem, references to the shape of the poem, the fact that it's in the middle of the page and what that represents. Least successful responses identified and named, but obviously didn't discuss those in any great length, more or less commenting. Responses in the middle tended to explain language and structure, relevant references, of course, those words from the mark scheme. References to metaphor, symbol, repetition, but we're explaining really rather than exploring. So there are 2 mark grids here for the AO1 and the AO2. We can see here that the first bullet point is about thanks for that question, Lorraine. If you go onto the training website, you'll be able to find that. I'm not sure when it is off the top of my head, but it is sometime in October. That for the full coursework. So the first bullet point about understanding, the second bullet point about interpreting information, ideas, and perspectives, and the third one about references. So basic, some, sound, and sustain for understanding, limited, valid, appropriate and relevant, and appropriate, detailed, and fully supporting in terms of the information for the second bullet point, and then limited, valid, appropriate, and detailed for the references. And then for the AO2, in terms of the language structure devices, is the first bullet point. We've got limited, some, clear and relevant, thorough and confident, and subtle and discriminating. For the second bullet point, we're talking about textual references, and it's limited, some, relevant, confident, and detailed, and discriminating and assured. And then the third bullet point in the AO2 mark scheme out of 18 is to do with the effect of the language and structure. Basic and simple in level 1, some developing in level 2, clear in level 3, detailed in level 4, and perceptive in level 5. Thanks for that question. Do the students need to answer each of the bullet points from the question in different paragraphs? No, not necessarily. The word in the question paper is should, so they should cover them. Obviously, it's a scaffold that might be helpful to students to go through in order, but they don't have to. Perhaps it's just there to help students. Okay. So we're just going to look here now at script 1A in your delegate pack. It is a full mark script, so there are no prizes for marking it, but you just might want to have a quick look at that script. Probably won't have time to read all of it, but you'll get a feel for it. So I'll just mute for a minute while you have a quick look at 1A for paper 2 in your exemplar pack. And as I said, it's a full mark response. Okay, I can see a question there about how you get access to the delegate pack. If you scroll back up through the chat, you'll find a number of hyperlinks that you can click on, and they're all there available for you to download. They're also under the resource button, but some people are finding it easier to use that download link. So hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look through that, got a feel of a really good response. It's very perceptive understanding of the poem here. You know, it's very precise. The references are used really well. The text, when it's used, is really excellent. It's analysed, it's integrated, discriminating references. You know, we'd all like to be able to write a response like that. It's just very, very well crafted. And when you think about the amount of time students have to do this, yeah, we could all aspire to writing a response as good as that one that you've just read there. Hopefully you all enjoyed that. So moving on to paper 2, questions 2, 3, and 4. This is imaginative creative writing. Students have a choice here of 3 questions. These were the 3 questions that were asked in the June 2024 paper. So a time when you or someone you know decorated something, can be real or imagined, and then the signposting to the AO5. Write a story with the title A Perfect Place. Again, signposting to the AO5, and then one that uses the images in the question paper as a springboard, and they're given the start of that, our eyes suddenly met. It doesn't have to be on the image, of course, it can be just based on that title, as long as that's the opening line. So that was the choice that candidates had in the summer. In terms of comments from the examiner, where candidates could meet both parts of the first bullet points in the mark scheme for AO5, they expressed ideas. For example, they often expressed ideas to achieve in level 2, but these ideas lacked the order for the second part of the bullet point. In level 3, they've connected them but not developed them. The success of tone, style, and register for AO4. Answering the question given. The spelling of basic vocabulary in AO5, accuracy, of course, as well for AO5. So on page 36 of the examiner report, which is in your download, you'll find many, many more comments on the creative writing. So the mark schemes, of course, are the same. It's just the weighting of the mark schemes that's different. So we have been through this, the mark allocation being different, and the same for the AO5. Again, same words in the levels-based mark scheme, just a different allocation of the marks. So we have got one for you to have a quick look at. It's a response to question 2, which I think will answer your question there, Mariah, descriptive writing or narrative. You know, this tends to be perhaps a little bit of description, a little bit of narrative. It is creative, imaginative. It's open to interpretation. A wide interpretation is used here for this question. Okay, so have a little look. This is it is a level 5 response. We're not going to make you guess this one, because obviously we're running a little bit tight on time at 22 the hour here for me. So just have a little look at 2A for a moment. I hope I've given you enough time just to have a glance through that one. Um, it's got 16 plus 11, so very, very good marks indeed. You know, it's a sophisticated response. Um, there are some really nice ways of building tension, describing setting in this response. It's perceptive and subtle. Um, and why did it not get 18 rather than 16 for that AO5 mark? Well, it's about the focus on the task. Obviously, you'll have lots of time to look at this in your departments after today's training. We've just got a lot of material for you today, but hopefully it's all good and relevant material. Manipulates complex ideas, got 11 out of 12 for the AO5. Nice use of vocabulary here, punctuated more or less with accuracy. Cohesion not fully sustained, which gives it 11 out of the 12 potential marks. But a very nice response. And of course, this candidate did very, very well on that question. I'm going to talk very briefly about the coursework because about half of the delegates in today's meeting are doing the coursework. I'm just going to signpost you to what is in your pack rather than going through what's in your pack, because I'm sure many of you are signed up for that coursework specific training that will be using these materials. So coursework is an alternative to paper 2. It's made up of 2 assignments. The new coursework for first assessment this year is in issue 6 of the specification. They use 3 texts, 1 poetry, 1 prose, and the third one of their choice, rather than writing a commentary, which was in the old assessments. So just making sure that you use the new assessment, and then 1 piece of imaginative writing for the assignment B. So this next slide is just a screenshot from page 81 of the sample assessment materials. It's there for you to read at your leisure. So I'm just going to talk you through what you've got in the slides and where they come from. This is an example of sample task that you could use for the assignment A for the coursework. And you'll see that there are brackets there where you insert the names of your chosen text. That's from page 80 of the sample assessment materials. And the next one is also a screenshot. This is from page 89 of the sample assessment materials. And it refers to assignment B, the creative imaginative writing, and the task setting there. So in the sample assessment materials, there are some possible assignments. There are 3 possible assignments in the sample assessment materials. This is one of them. It's just to help you formulate with your students a question really for the imaginative writing. Of course, you've got the past papers and the main paper, the art paper that you can also use for those. So there are two folders, SO3, that were in your downloads for today. There are new coursework marking based on the new assessment from this June. And there are some commentaries which follow on the next 2 slides, but they're there for you to read at your leisure. But there will be in the coursework training session, there will be, I think it's 6 new pieces of coursework that you will be being trained on that you can use as benchmarks in your centres in that specific coursework training coming up in October. So these ones are currently on the website. The one that's given 22, so it's quite a low mark. Lowish mark, sorry, this one is the low mark, the other one is the slightly higher mark. I haven't got that data in the top of my head, Paul, but if you go on to the training from Pearson, you'll find all of the upcoming training there. I think it's sometime in October, but I haven't got it in the top of my head. My colleague Jamie is running that one, which is why it's not in my diary. So this folder B is a low one, folder A is a higher one, but there are 6 new folders for you coming up in that new training. Talked very briefly, I did promise you an extra slide on the spoken language endorsement, just a reminder that that appears on the front of the student certificate. It's graded at pass, merit and distinction. And that slide is just an overview. The presentation should last no longer, with the questions, no longer than 10 minutes. Oh, thank you very much for that, Lorraine. There we go, 17th of October. Thank you for looking that one up for me there. So as you know, at the end of each training, we talk about how we can support you, support and resources that are available. So just going to run through these. There is support for you available at every stage. So things like the Getting Started guide we haven't talked about, but that is available for download on the Pearson website. There are training events, there are face-to-face events, both in the UK, specific to centre, and more general ones, and in some of our regions around the world. We run those face-to-face training events. So there's a question I'm just going to take. Heard some news that there will be different systems of exam for language module 2 starting in 2024. Exam module 2, are you talking about exam paper 2? No, I don't think that's correct. So for language A, module 3, there was the change in the coursework in terms of assignment A. Speaking and listening is still an endorsement. In 2025, exam students will be able to register for the old system or the new. No, that I haven't heard that at all. So, as we were. Subject advisor, I'll be talking about schemes of work, sample assessment materials, examiner reports are all available for you on the Pearson website. Exemplars. Yep, you can have the 2 teachers as the audience. That's fine for the spoken language endorsement, Lorraine. Yeah, not a problem. What is a problem is if they don't, if candidates aren't asked a question or 2 questions, or a couple of questions, because that is part of the criteria that they're being assessed on. Past papers, exam wizard I'm going to talk about. Mark schemes are available for you. Results plus, access to scripts, and so on, which I'll just touch on now as we come towards the end here. So this is the landing page, and you can see there that we've got the specification and the sample assessments. Any changes to the specification will be reflected in the latest. So we're looking at the latest specification is there on that hyperlink. Exam materials are all the past main papers, our papers, examiner reports, and you'll see there that there are a number of teaching and learning materials to support you in the teaching of this. And that, keep checking back there, because that's constantly being added to. Results Plus, as you know, is that analytical tool where you can see the breakdown of your students, class against class, teacher against teacher, your school, boys against girls, against other schools in your region. You can also put mock exam results, plenty of things to do there, a few easy steps there for you to sign up on that hyperlink. And there are also recordings of how to use Results Plus. And for those English teachers who are good at statistics, it gives you the little tools to help you decide which of your questions you need to focus perhaps a bit more teaching on. Perhaps your students are doing better in comparison than they are in analysis, or the other way around. It's just a tool to help you. Exam Wizard is, of course, that platform where you can make your own question papers and where you can find the mark schemes and where it's the first place where the question papers and mark schemes are put after the exam has been sat. So that's there for you as well. Access to scripts, that's from results day. If you're brand new to us, you can see on results day the complete script of your students to see how they did. It stops you having to make speculative entries for reviews of marking because you can see why the marks were awarded. It's an excellent tool. You can obviously, look at everything every student has written in their exam from results day onwards, and then it has a closure day, which might be around about today, I think, but I'm not entirely sure of the exact day. But it's free of charge. It stops you having to ask for things like photocopies. They're all there for you to see on results day. There are, of course, paid resources, but they are there available for you. You don't have to use them. There are plenty of other things you can use. This is the student book for specification A. It gives you access to a great deal of online stuff as well. But of course, there are lots of other places where you can find resources to help you with your teaching. It's just to highlight that there is a book available for the latest edition. You'll see this is second edition of the student book. Now, Claire Haviland, I will have said this on Monday's session as well. She's the subject advisor for all things English, so she oversees the UK, Home 1EN, English language, and the 1ET English literature. She oversees specification A, IGCSE, 4EA. She also oversees 4EB, specification B, 4ET, the English literature, IGCSE specification, the home A levels, and the international A levels if you're teaching those in your centres around the world. Any questions after today's training, you've got her phone number there, her email, her Twitter feed, which always tells you which exciting book she's reading. Please do sign up to her regular subject updates, which will tell you of any changes at all, and you can book an appointment with her. So any questions, she is your go-to after today's event. So at this point, thank you so much. It's been a very, very full-on session for me and for you. So thank you very much for your comments in the chat box. Well done on your very excellent marking when we were looking at those exemplars. You have a lot of material to support you that were available in the download. Any further questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I will pass back to the moderator to close the training. So thank you all very, very much.